Hi, everyone.
Hi, Fraser.
Okay, I have a list of questions here. But I'm going to start off, before we get into sort of the questions that people submitted, I wanted to ask general questions. And can I ask you the question, um, what does holistic medicine mean to you? What is holistic medicine from your perspective? And you can either answer me or answer them, it doesn't matter.
He's looking at you.
Who's going to take the holistic medicine question?
So I see holistic as treating the entire person, not just the symptom that they walk in with, but the home that they're coming from, the family that they participate with every day, the stressors that they have, where they work, what toxins they may be absorbing, what toxic stressors they may be absorbing. But also, I think of holistic as how we treat. So not only what we look at in the history and with the patient, but also the modalities that we use. Nutrition, mind-body techniques, meditation, deep breathing, stress management, nutrition, a lot of nutrition, supplements, herbal remedies, homeopathic remedies, exercise, different exercise techniques, and then lastly, medications.
I think it's everything that Ann said, but I would also add that I think one thing that makes us unique, I don't know if it's unique, but I think it's a special benefit of our practices wrapped into the holistic care is a relationship that we develop with our patients and that I think our staff develops with our patients that makes our practice a healing place, not just because of the mechanics of the interaction, but because of the spirit of the interaction. And I think that's very important, and I think we do that pretty well. It's definitely a priority for us.
What would you say is the hardest thing about living a holistic wellness lifestyle in Northern Virginia?
Lack of time and busyness. So culture is, especially Northern Virginia culture, it has been designed to create busyness because busyness sells junk food. Busyness sells fast food. So, people think the biggest obstacle is the cost of healthy food. It's really not. It's time to shop and prepare and really enjoy the food. That's a big part of eating well, is not eating on the run. It's enjoying the food and who you're eating it with. So no doubt it's the lack of time that we create our own busyness, unfortunately, a lot of time.
Lack of time, Ann? What is one thing that you can't believe that you used to believe as a doctor?
There are so many.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, our training was traditional. We went to a traditional medical school, and it was an open-minded traditional medical school, so there were more open-minded teachers, but everything we learned in training had to be unlearned. And I look back and say, I can't believe that we thought that. Medications, just the emphasis on medications is, and we believed that. We came out believing that. I think that's probably the biggest one. But the second biggest one is that Lyme doesn't exist. I can't believe that we actually didn't think chronic Lyme was an issue.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge one. I think I would say that it's a tie between, how being healthy requires medication. That's a myth. That's a lie. And also that fat is bad for you. That's probably the one that that still gets me. I still get angry about it when, excuse me, I see people who have embraced a low-fat lifestyle for no other reason than because they've been told it's healthy. That there are some people who need a low-fat diet. There's certain genetic problems and certain medical problems that require that, but as a universal health and wellness practice, that's not the truth. And unlearning that myself and helping other people unlearn it has been a major challenge. So.
To visit or revisit Lyme, why is, this might be too big of a question, why is Lyme so challenging? I mean, can you give Lyme 101? We were talking about Lyme in HCG group, and people were describing, Lyme through the body and doing this. Why is Lyme such a challenge to diagnose or to understand or to treat?
Well,
in 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, well, the biggest problem that makes it a challenge is that there's a tremendous lack. There's a deficit of knowledge. There's a deficit of science. And whenever that is the case, then it's difficult to make educated decisions about what you're dealing with and how to treat it. So that's the big problem. But in terms of the disease itself, it is a bacteria, and if we also include the other infections that go along with Lyme, they are infections that poison the body at a very fundamental, foundational level. And once that happens, any symptom, any sign, any syndrome becomes a possibility. So really, if someone coughs, that could be Lyme. If someone has nightmares, that could be Lyme. So it becomes very challenging because you can blame everything on Lyme, but not everything is Lyme. So that's a challenge. Diagnosis is a challenge because Lyme and its friends have, at least 10, and I'm sure there are more that we haven't discovered yet, ways to evade detection. And again, that deficit of knowledge really affects us there. And then in treatment, everybody's Lyme is different. Every single case is different. When any bug has been in our bodies for, hold on, there's been the sound engineer
difficulties.
has had a
Excuse me.
problem.
And you're not supposed to spike the equipment after a particularly good answer.
So
Is it still on, Ann? Is it still on?
the red light.
The red light is.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? So when the bug or bugs have been in your body, and this goes for our good gut flora, any bacteria, any organism that lives with us or within us for a long period of time, there's actually an exchange of DNA, an exchange of genetic material that has been well documented. And this is helpful in many cases, but it's not helpful all the time when it comes to Lyme, but that exchange makes everybody's Lyme bug their own custom, individual, genetically unique bug, and that just takes it to a whole, different stratosphere of customized medicine that takes a lot of extra time.
Shifting gears a little bit, you were talking about eating being one of the big challenges in living holistically in Northern Virginia. So let's talk about parenting with regards to food. You have picky kids. What recommendations do you have for parents about changing the eating habits of picky kids, how do you change those habits? So what kind of advice do you give to parents in that area or other areas related to having a holistic lifestyle?
Well, I think one of the big things is to involve the kids in the growing, the purchasing, the preparation, the laying out on the table, involve them in the entire process so that they start to own it. Kids are so hungry for that kind of stuff. And there are actually studies showing that if kids grow vegetables, they're a lot more likely to eat them. The second thing is to bring out variety, offer variety, different colors, different types. There are all kinds of cookbooks that show you how to make a car out of a cucumber and carrots that are chopped. I've never done anything like that, but there are many ways to present food that makes it, more fun. And the third thing I think that is most important is never, ever, ever make a separate meal for your child. Where, he only eats chicken fingers, so we eat our normal meal, but my kid gets chicken fingers. I see that if we go to a restaurant, parents will bring in a McDonald's meal for the child because that's all that they would eat. They won't eat the restaurant food. And that just feeds this idea that the child is going to be able to eat whatever they want, whenever they want it. So those are the three big ones.
Anything to add to that?
I think the only thing I would add is that you can never force a child to eat something, either forcing with some sort of punishment or forcing with some sort of incentive. I'll give you this if you eat this. That doesn't really lend itself to a long-term good food choices unless there's some kind of reward. What that sets up is a sweet treat if I eat this kind of thing. And then in our house we have a rule that you are allowed to say that you don't like something and you don't want to eat a certain food, but only after you've tried it. You've tried a substantial amount of it on 7 separate occasions. Okay, after that, you are allowed to say, you know what, I've tried that, and I gave it a shot, and I don't like it. Well, okay, that's fine, but some studies...
I don't count.
I don't count either, because it doesn't take that long. It's usually the first or second try, and they actually find that they like it. So you'll never get to 7 unless you really have a special
We actually
child.
have a child that starts to gag when he even sees summer squash on the table. So we don't, we don't make him eat it 7 times because.
You can, your taste buds are just nerves, and they can be trained. They're plastic. They can be taste can be learned and unlearned. Taste preference, that is. So after 7 tries, there's usually a change in the synapses of the taste buds, and things start to actually taste good. Taste is just an interpretation of sensation, so it could be retrained.
The other thing I think is that our kids at least watch our reactions to food, and so if we get really excited about fresh vegetables at the farmer's market, they start to get excited. If we drive past McDonald's and say, "Oh, there's the poison stuff," then they start to see McDonald's as a source of poison.
Modeling.
If we get really excited about eating a hot fudge sundae, then that's what's in their head every time they think about hot fudge sundae. That must be really good.
Right.
So I think they feed off of us, and sometimes I'm going to give you away. Sometimes I'll make something vegetable like he has always not liked beets. And I love beets, and so I make beets. And so I'll make beets, and I'll be really excited for the family, and I'll put it on the table, and I'll see Dave's face, and he's really sitting there, and he's trying to be happy and excited. And he'll take it, because I'll be like, "Better take a bite." He'll take a bite, and he'll be sitting there chewing, and he's really trying to not look like he hates every second of it. So now I see my kids do the same thing. They've learned that facial expression. I'm really trying to like this, Mom. I'm really trying to like this. So he likes beets
I like
now,
beets
though.
now.
7 chews.
7
right?
times. I got to like it.
Let me just
kidding.
ask, did everybody check their cell phones and turn it to vibrate or to silent or whatever it's necessary so that it's not going to interrupt, please? Okay, how about this one? How or when did you decide that you wanted to be doctors?
Well, for me, it was kind of there were a couple decisions. One, when I was very young, I thought it would be cool to be a doctor, and because I have always liked science. And then life's journey, and I've probably told some people in here some of this, but it took me down a road where I gave up on that as an option, and went to college as a pre-veterinary student, and I was going to treat large animals. I was going to be a large animal vet, and really was all in. Worked on a cattle ranch, showed a pig at the 4-H club, and man, I was in. I was all in. And then I started to not be so all in when I shadowed some large animal vets, man, and they work hard, and it is just, the days are long, and the lifestyle is tough. So I started to look for other options, and had a friend who was pre-med, and we were going to go bowling. This is, I don't know if you want to know that your doctor is your doctor because of some chance event, but so we were going to go bowling. He said, Dave, I got to go to this MCAT, study course meeting, the MCAT Medical College Admission Test, big deal. And so he had to go to this thing where they were he said, there's free food. So I said, okay, I'll come. And so I go there, and I listen to this sales rep selling the MCAT prep course, and he's talking about what does it take to get into medical school. And I had already given up on that. And as he's talking, I realized, man, I think I could do that. I think I could do it. And so I left that night. I changed, in the next 2 weeks, I changed my major, and we studied for the MCAT together, and he flunked, and he sells real estate now. He was like the biology department's, he was a star, and he just, that test, he just didn't do well, and he went a different direction, and here I am now. If that meeting hadn't taken place, I wouldn't have met Ann. I wouldn't, be a holistic doctor. I'd probably be sticking my arm up cows' butts, up to the shoulder 10 times a day. And,
This is going on the end.
So it was, it was kind of a dream that I lost and then found again sort of by chance, but, nothing happens by chance, and so there you go.
Dave's one of the rare cases of somebody who bailed out of being a vet in order to become a doctor.
That's true.
Odd. Okay. Ann?
So I had no idea about being a doctor. Nobody in my family is a doctor. Never thought about it. I was in college, junior year. I was a psych major. I knew I didn't want to go into psychology because it's too complicated. And
As opposed
Weirdest
to
interview ever.
So a friend of mine, I was taking a health psychology class, which I loved. So I decided maybe health psychology, dealing with nutrition and how nutrition affects the brain, and that's fascinating to me. And a friend of mine talked me into taking the gross anatomy class at James Madison because they actually have real cadavers. Not a lot of universities that offer that. And so on a whim, I took gross anatomy and fell in love with the human body. And decided at that point, that was the end of my junior year, that I was going to try to do pre-med. And I walked into the pre-med office, and he said, "You can't do it. All you have is psych courses. These are, you could pass psych in your sleep. You can't get into medical school on psychology. So you got to go back and start all over again, take all your pre-med courses, and don't talk to me until you do that." So I did, and all in a year and a half, I took them all and went back in with my 4.0 average and said, "I'm ready." So there's no turning back. But I knew going into medicine that I wanted to focus on prevention and health and nutrition. So I knew that going into it.
How did you two meet?
There was an event prior to the first day of medical school. I think it was the weekend before school started. And it was a social event for our class, and I was actually there with my fiance at the time, and there were a bunch of people were going to go to a baseball game. This was in Norfolk, and there's a minor league baseball team, and they said, I said, "Well, who's in charge of getting tickets for that?" And they said, "Ann McCarthy." And I said, "Well, who's Ann McCarthy?" And they said, "Oh, well, she's over there." And so I walked over, and she had her back turned, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and she turned around, and and then she ignored me for 3 years, and the rest is history.
And then for 11 years?
Yeah. So we met in medical school, That's the short story.
Ann, anything to add?
I unfortunately don't remember that event.
See?
Remember she won
Told
the
you.
game. She remembers she won
Told
the
ya.
game.
But we were very good friends for 3 years. His engagement obviously fizzled very soon after first year started. And we were very good friends for about 3 years and then started dating. Got married first year of residency.
Mm-hmm.
Let me shift to some specifics about medicine.
Something that actually helps other
I
people.
think it's
Oh, good.
Get to know your dog. Can you talk about thermograms and women's wellness? Maybe define
Yes.
thermograms for those of us who don't know what those are.
Yes. So thermograms are a test that measures heat given off from the body, and it's an alternative to mammography. Mammography has a lot of negatives surrounding it. It is the tool for breast cancer screening, but there's a lot of radiation. I think it's the equivalent of 1,000 chest x-rays focused on very fragile tissue. And not to mention the smushing effect, which is not only painful and uncomfortable, but if there are cancer cells, it can spread them. So thermography is an alternative that utilizes technology that does not have any radiation. There's not only no compression, there's actually no touching of the body at all. And it simply measures heat given off from the breast tissue. And cancer gives off heat about 10 years before actual tumors form. And so it's considered much more sensitive than mammograms, which unfortunately can't pick up cancer until it's formed a sizable tumor, which is why mammograms make no difference in outcomes for women in terms of whether and when they die of breast cancer. There's a lot more research coming out that mammograms really aren't the best screening tool. The problem with thermography is that it is so sensitive because it picks up heat, and a lot more than cancer can give off heat. If we did a workout that morning or the day before, that can give off heat. If we're fighting a flu early on in the virus that can give off heat. So there's a lot of false positives with thermography. And thermography is also used to diagnose other areas. But a lot of people get full body thermography scans, which I don't recommend for the same reason that I don't recommend full body CT scans. It just gives you a lot of information that probably won't make any difference. But then you have to chase down whatever it is that's found. So thermography, it's most of the time not covered by insurance. I think it runs about $150 just for a breast screening. A lot of controversy about it. The insurance companies, the FDA, they're not 100% in support of thermography yet. So it becomes a personal decision.
Can you talk about adrenal exhaustion and what adrenal exhaustion is, and how and when you test for it?
Man, that's up there with Lyme in terms of a big topic. So the adrenal glands are, most of us are born with one on each kidney, and their primary purpose is to help the body manage stress. They secrete.
They're about this size.
Yeah.
They're really small.
Really small, and they have a big job to do. So they.
Whether exhausted.
I'm tired. So unfortunately, no living thing is set up to handle chronic stress. In nature, if something is chronically stressed, it dies or moves. Migration happens not because the animals want to go south because they like it. It happens because staying north is too stressful. And the adrenal glands, which all mammals at least have, are like any other tissue in the body. They can actually be worn out. They can be overtaxed, especially in this chronic long-term stress, very little recovery pattern that most Americans, particularly in places like Northern Virginia, are. The adrenal glands are left to do something that they were really not created to do, which is help the body cope with chronic stress. And stress is it's a gigantic umbrella that includes good stressors and bad stressors. There's exercise, for example. Someone can exhaust their adrenals by exercising too much. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're working 80 hours a week, and it could be any stress. Infection is stress. Toxins are stress. Eating food you're allergic to is stress. So over time, the adrenal glands initially respond with a sort of a hyper-adaptive response to the stress, where they actually start to overproduce the necessary hormones and neurotransmitters that help us cope. And then unfortunately, unless there's a prolonged recovery period, they actually start to underproduce those things as we start to burn out those reserves. And the final stage of that is called adrenal fatigue or adrenal exhaustion, and that's a pretty serious condition that's very hard to recover from once you get really to the totally burned out adrenal glands. It is different from the generally recognized conventional medicine diagnosis of Addison's disease, which is total adrenal failure. And that happens for many reasons, but in that situation, the adrenal glands have actually stopped working completely. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a severe underproduction of the necessary hormones and neurotransmitters. So we have learned through training and experience that pretty much anyone that walks into our office with complaints of fatigue, a lot of the things that we try to diagnose and treat, the symptoms sound very similar. Fatigue, muscle aches and pains, headaches, mental, cognitive impairments, emotional disturbances, digestive problems, immune system problems like asthma and allergies and eczema and sleep issues. So I would say that almost everyone that we treat gets an adrenal evaluation. We do that most of the time, almost exclusively using saliva testing. There's plenty of data that saliva hormone levels are more accurate and more accurate than blood testing and urine testing, and they're certainly easier to obtain and less expensive to obtain. So almost all of our patients get an adrenal saliva panel and then we use, hopefully we're able to use natural remedies to treat it, although sometimes we do have to use hormone replacement therapy in extreme cases. But it can be very severe. Hopefully we can catch it early. We're seeing a lot more children with adrenal exhaustion because their mothers are adrenally exhausted. And so the adrenally exhausted mother teaches the child child's adrenal glands via the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It trains that axis to function a certain way. And the child is born with the same pattern that the mother has, even though it has not experienced the same stress.
And actually, during second and third trimester, if the mother's adrenal glands are burned out, her body will utilize the baby's adrenal glands to cope with stress. And so that's another reason children are now born with adrenal fatigue.
Mm-hmm. And so we have to intervene younger and younger and younger. Every generation starts life a little sicker than the previous generation. Unfortunately, it's very sad. So, thanks for asking.
Yes. Speaking of stress, what are some of the strategies that you recommend for your patients or that you recommend for yourself in terms of managing / reducing stress?
Well, we live a very stressful lifestyle, so we're actually good people to ask. We ate running out the door tonight. We're far from perfect. So, but we have to talk the talk. So what we tell our patients to do is, and what we try to do is the big things are sleep. I think sleep is the most important thing. Ideally sleep from about 10 p.m. to 6 or 7 a.m. The people that stay up until 1, that 10 to 1 time frame is so key for health and healing that you miss out on. Even if you get your 8 hours, you miss out on a lot. So sleep is number 1. Hydration, the very basics. Keeping your blood sugar stable is essential for minimizing stress. The more your blood sugar swings, the more stress you have internally. That has nothing to do with what's going on outside of you, but it certainly adds to your internal stress. And then exercise, and that can even be gentle walking. It doesn't have to be strenuous exercise. That can actually be counterproductive when you're stressed and exhausted. It can even be just gentle stretching, yoga, 10 minutes on the floor at bedtime, kind of stretching your body a little bit. Deep breathing techniques are very effective. Prayer, we use prayer a lot, meditation. Those are kind of the core basic principles to follow, and then you can add on from there, but I think that's the most important stuff.
I would also add that what I have realized is that I make a lot of appointments for things. I make an appointment basically to change the litter box for my cat every week, and I really don't miss that. I make an appointment to take out the garbage. These aren't things I write down, but mentally I put them in a place of priority, and I do not neglect them. But what I don't do regularly is make appointments for joy, things that have fun and that give me joy. I don't make time for those and protect those often enough. I don't scratch and claw time out of our schedule for those kind of things, and I think that's very important to do. You have to have some, you're never going to eliminate all the stress. So you have to build into it regularly scheduled joy appointments. We all have a plan for our finances, and we have a plan for our kids, education, and we have a plan to, for our nutrition, but not many people have a stress management plan, which may be more important than all of it. So planning that is something that many people don't do. They just, well, I've got 20 minutes left over here. What can I do? So I try to get people to plan. I try to get people to have an objective observer evaluate their stress for them. The brain plays amazing tricks on us to make us think things are okay and normal. There's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is about this guy, Viktor Frankl, who lived in a concentration camp, and after a while, it didn't really bother him all that much. Your brain will trick you into thinking you're not overwhelmed, it's not too much, you can handle this, you don't need to take a break, you don't need a vacation. You have to have someone on the outside look at you and say, are you crazy? This is insane. You are going to get sick from this. And someone with no emotional connection who can say, you need to eliminate this, 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 and this, and help you weed through it, because most of us are just not able to do that. So planning and having that overall intention is something else I would add to that.
Can you talk a little bit about how you each, I suppose, made the switch to holistic medicine from non-holistic medicine?
I call it coming to the dark side of the force. Yeah, it was all Anne for me. I think, an excellent conventional doctor. I was so quick with the prescription pad. It was like a holster. I could just write them. I knew every dose and indication and every study. Man, I knew it all. And before you finished telling me the symptom, I could prescribe. It was so easy. But when Ann and I, and she would, she was practicing holistic medicine, and I thought she was crazy. I thought that what she was doing was fun for her. But, when it was time to do the real medicine, people would come see me. And so we've actually worked together. Our entire, relationship has been us working together. And but we really, when we started working in this, the current facility, and we shared a very intimate space, and I saw how her patients were improving, and not just that they were improving, but they were getting well, and that she had this relationship with them, that I was over here pushing pills and having 15 minutes with people, and I got really jealous of that. I started to think, wow, maybe there's both from the results, but also from the relationship that I think is very important. And then I got sick. I got carbon monoxide poisoning, and had to submit myself reluctantly to a saliva test and these other things. And man, it helped so much. It just immediately changed my perspective. And from there, it has just been, I think for me, one of the really gratifying things is learning that there's so much credible science behind what we do, and that we can really safely help people get well using, non-conventional methods. So I think it's the best of both worlds, but it took a while for me to admit I was wrong about it. So it's Anne, she brought me over to the dark side.
I went into medicine knowing I wanted to do holistic. So in medical school, I sought out holistic teachers, holistic opportunities. I took all of the woo-woo, side courses that you can take if you, are weird.
I was doing shock trauma,
He was doing it.
and she was doing nutrition.
There was an anesthesiologist in medical school who would come out of the closet on Saturday morning and do acupuncture in this small little room in one of the academic buildings at the very end of the hallway. And so I found out about it and came in and watched him. And he actually had patients, and they do this all the time over in Asia, but he had patients that would come in for major surgery and do it all under acupuncture instead of anesthesia. That's how effective it was. Anyway, I have from day one have sought out holistic teachings.
Can you just double check here, just as you're moving around? I think you can keep it there, but just be careful with your hands. I just don't want to get that rustling on it. Half of it.
I always say also that Anne is, I'm a reluctant health nut. I grew up eating junk food, and I miss junk food and miss Diet Coke, and I miss fast food, and if you put a bowl of ice cream and a bowl of asparagus in front of me, I'm gonna eat the ice cream. And Anne, on the other hand, she actually likes being healthy. You put a bowl of ice cream and a bowl of asparagus in front of her, she's going to eat the asparagus, and I think that's just weird. But it's right, So it took me a lot longer to come over. But
Can you talk a little bit about allergy testing, and when do you recommend or not recommend allergy testing?
There are the immune system has at least 10 different ways to respond to something that is a foreign protein. There are ways that are both healthy. That response can be both healthy, and the response can be pathogenic or unhealthy. Most allergists have specialized in testing for the immediate type hypersensitivity reaction, which is the famous eat a peanut, swell up and die, the anaphylactic reaction, or the milder cases of that are hives, itching, it can induce asthma, etc. The body also has delayed type hypersensitivity reactions that may not, be visible or recognizable for days after the allergen is present, and that could be an environmental allergen, that could be a food, that could be a scent, a fragrance. So what we rely on mostly in our food allergy testing, which is primarily what we test for, food allergies, is the delayed type hypersensitivity reaction, primarily done through the IgG antibody testing. And it does not evaluate a person for the risk of immediate anaphylaxis, and we have to be very clear about that. But it can make a difference because those delayed hypersensitivity reactions are a major cause of stress. And that stress over time, even if there are no recognizable symptoms externally, can cause wear and tear, can cause immune system dysfunction, inflammation, and that leads to almost every chronic illness that we know of. So we primarily do blood testing. There's also a cell-mediated test run by a lab called AllCat that we do. That doesn't look for a specific antibody. It looks for the response of white blood cells to a challenge. And that's also an effective way for allergies that really looks at, all of the immune system in one shot. We pretty much test everyone. It's up there with adrenal gland testing in terms of something that can affect someone at a very foundational level, so we want to evaluate it and remove those foods. And doing that can make a huge difference for people.
I'm actually different. I don't, that's typically not something I would do on everybody. I typically try to convince people to stop gluten and dairy if they're willing, and then see how much better they feel. And a lot of times they come in feeling so much better that you may not need to test for other foods.
Let me ask, I guess, this question here. This is a question about inflammation. So that sounds like maybe one of those Lyme, adrenal fatigue questions, like a big question. Its likely sources and how to treat. But before, maybe, and I'm not sure if these are connected, can you explain gluten? What is gluten? And why is it such a pride? Why does it need to be eradicated from our society?
I always joke about how at some point the National Gluten Organization is going to figure out that there's this big gap in Loudoun County. For some reason, nobody's buying glutinous breads. But
So gluten is a protein found in plants, specifically concentrated in these seeds of grasses, known that what we call grains. And there are specific kinds of grains that have this. It's actually falls under the category of something called a lectin. And lectins are part of the plant immune system. Actually, humans have lectins. Lectins are a big part of how our immune system interacts with other things' immune systems and how our immune system interacts with our environment. So gluten is actually designed to kill things that threaten the plant. It is its sole purpose is not, it wasn't necessarily, at least in nature, its presence is not to make it taste better, to make the grain taste better and make it chewier. It is to prevent a fungal infection of the wheat. So when we consume it, and the grain, particularly wheat, let's just talk about wheat. Wheat has changed over the centuries because of both intentional and unintentional manipulation by humans to have a much higher gluten content. And when we consume modern day wheat, that protein that is actually designed to inflict injury upon whatever is threatening the wheat actually inflicts injury upon us. And our immune systems cannot cope with that often. Gluten has, I always tell people gluten has magical powers. It is so effective at leaving the gut and crossing the blood-brain barrier that it is being studied by the pharmaceutical industry. Freudian.
Capture on tape, that Freudian slip.
Freudian. The pharmaceutical industry, which is synonymous with injury. The pharmaceutical industry as a delivery mechanism, so that if they want to get a medicine into your brain, they attach it to gluten, and gluten carries it across the blood-brain barrier.
there's actually a website. This is really good to know for people who are trying to avoid gluten. I think it's called Gluten Free Drugs, but it's where you can plug in any pharmaceutical medication and find out if it's gluten-free. And everybody should do that. If they're given an antibiotic or thyroid medicine or whatever, they should check it and make sure there's no gluten.
Yeah, I believe that, I really do believe no one should eat gluten. And particularly if you have any condition that, is caused by an increase in inflammation. Just pretty much everything. But I think our children should not be exposed to gluten regardless of what the allergy test says. And I always qualify an allergy test that comes back with a negative for gluten allergy. It doesn't really matter if you're allergic to it. It's going to hurt you.
Still cause problems.
That's what it does. That's its job. Its job is to incite inflammation. So it's no accident that it causes problems.
And the common response that people will give is, but it's, bread is the staff of life, and it's in the Bible, and traditional practices way back when actually specifically were in place to remove the gluten. I don't know if they knew specifically that they were removing the gluten, but the soaking of the grain, the fermenting of the grain, the use of a starter to make bread that takes weeks to make is actually a process that removes 99% of the gluten, and which is why bread has been around for a very long time and tolerated a lot better than it is now.
So I'm going to answer my own question about what is your opinion on a grain-free diet for kids? I think that's gluten.
No, it's much bigger than that. A grain-free diet includes gluten-containing grains, but it also includes gluten-free grains. I think it's a great idea, but my only hesitation is that it's a very tricky tightrope to walk to educate children about healthy food versus imposing upon them something that leads to an identity crisis later on. Sometimes it is medically necessary to put a child on a grain-free diet or a very low-sugar diet or even the HCG diet. But we only do so with a lot of coaching to both the parents and the children that this is not because they're broken, this is not because they're bad, this is not, and that, yes, it is different from other children, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with them. We try always not to force it upon them because that leads to a lot of resentment later on. It's very challenging to do that without creating a child who later develops an eating disorder. So it is something that I will often recommend, but I always try as hard as I can to have the child choose to do it. And I use some Jedi mind tricks to get them to agree to it. Sometimes it doesn't work, and then I just have to say, look, do it or else. But that's tricky. So I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. But
When do you think pharmaceuticals are appropriate?
I think starting at birth, we should be medicated.
The pharmaceutical injury?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Vaccinations and then Lipitor from birth. What do you think, honey?
That's a tough question. I mean, there are people with high blood pressure that do everything they can with their lifestyle, and for whatever reason, they cannot get their blood pressure out of a dangerous place. That's the time to bring in, when we've tried supplements and we've tried everything in the holistic armamentarium, that's a time to use medicine. Diabetes is another great example. Diabetes is a lifestyle disease, type 2 diabetes. And there are a lot of people out there that really don't want to make significant changes in lifestyle. And high blood sugar is damaging to tissues. There's no doubt about it. So that's another time to pull. I mean, there are lots of times where we'll use medication. It's just we try a lot of other stuff first.
I think it's really interesting that sometimes I think what coming from a conventional training background, it's interesting. Sometimes we have to convince people to use pharmaceuticals. They have, you know, you asked us earlier, what do you think are some myths and some sort of lies that we're taught about food and that conventional medicine teaches? Well, I think that there are some myths out there about pharmaceuticals, that they're always bad, they kill everybody, they destroy your liver, the prescription antibiotics always destroy your gut, et cetera, et cetera. And, we are extremely careful about using pharmaceuticals, but it's ironic when I'm sitting across from someone and I'm trying to get them to take a prescription medicine for their thyroid or their Lyme or their, diabetes, and there's a lot of, just on the flip side of the coin, there's a lot of, I think appropriate fear of pharmaceuticals, but there has to be a balanced approach to that. And there are some holistic medical doctors who really believe there's never a place for pharmaceuticals, even in the most extreme cancers, et cetera. And I don't think Ann and I believe that there's never a place. But it's every decision about that is individual.
Let's revisit this question of alternative treatment, specifically with regards to Lyme. What are your thoughts about the following alternative treatments for Lyme and co-infections?
Mm-hmm.
IV vitamin C, Hulda Clark's Zapper.
Mm.
Hilda Clark's Zapper.
Well, IV vitamin C is an effective Lyme treatment. I used it on myself when I was very sick. I believe
We
it's
think that's actually may have been one of the things that
I think it
turned him
helped me
around.
turn the corner.
Mhm.
So human cells, mammalian cells, have this really cool enzyme called superoxide dismutase. Superoxide dismutase has the ability to neutralize bad things like hydrogen peroxide. Bacterial cells are not blessed with this enzyme, so we can use that against them. Giving 50,000, 100,000 milligrams of vitamin C, and by that I'm talking about ascorbic acid, not whole food vitamin C that's found in nature. There is, as the body processes that level of ascorbic acid, some of it is converted into hydrogen peroxide. And that hydrogen peroxide can semi-selectively kill bacteria and other cells that don't contain, unfortunately it kills red blood cells if you overdo it. If you've ever had a blood stain on your shirt, you can put peroxide on it, and that kills, it bursts the red cells because they don't have superoxide dismutase. So you can overdose on vitamin C, but so it is very effective. Not only that, it's a great chelating agent. There's a lot of evidence about biofilm formation with Lyme and its co-infections, and that part of that biofilm, part of the superstructure of that are minerals. Some of them are toxic minerals. So vitamin C is a chelating agent, and it can actually disrupt the biofilm and make the other treatments work better. Not to mention that it's an extremely powerful antioxidant. It's extremely important for the adrenal glands. And the list just goes on and on and on. So I believe in that passionately, that vitamin C is a good treatment. The Zapper, I haven't had much experience with. I've heard anecdotally that it helps some people. So I'm not opposed to it by any means, particularly if someone's going to let you borrow it to give it a try.
What is it?
As I understand, it's a device that it's sort of like a Rife machine, which uses electromagnetic frequency to destroy certain cells. It's sort of finding the resonance frequency of the organism you're trying to kill and going after it that way. Never had to use a Rife machine or a zapper, so I can't say much. But, I think part of holistic medicine, like Ann mentioned earlier, is just being open-minded to, the treatment. A lot of times a patient will come in and say, I read about this, I want to try this. Well, I believe something led them to read about that. The fact that it resonates with them is an important thing, because I think we should respect a person's intuition about their own illness. And so I think we should be open unless there is a defined danger. I think we should be open to helping them experiment with it.
How have you grown as doctors since you've been in holistic medicine? Why don't
I haven't grown at all.
You
So
answer for
no.
Dave, and Dave, you answer for Ann.
So I think I've grown. It's interesting. When we were in Richmond, I had a little practice that was basically a room with a telephone and a pseudo bed and a stethoscope, and saw patients. And I kept files with all my notes. And this was many years ago, and I kept the files because a lot of patients followed me from Richmond and would make the trip up here once we moved. And so I have the files still. And I looked back in those, and I realized that I used to have this set idea. It was almost like you with the prescription pad. I had this set idea of what everybody needs to do. And I would walk into the first meeting, I would listen to everything that they were going through, and then I would barrage them with all the changes that need to be made in order for them to reach phenomenal health. And it took me a very long time to realize that that is not a good approach. That people are at different places in their walk, and some are walking in and only able to handle one small tidbit, and others are hungry for all of it. They could sit for hours and just have me unload everything that I know, and they want it all and want to take it home. So finding where a person is and how much they want, how much information they want, I think is hopefully I'm doing that well. I think sometimes I get so excited, and I know what will help them, and they may not be ready for it, but I think it's going to work, and so I put it on them. And so I am realizing that I need to not do that as much.
I think that we have both grown, mostly because we never give up trying to figure it out to help people, and that has led us to learn more and more and more and more. We have grown based on our own experiences, but also we really take to heart the experiences of our patients, and it really helps our practice evolve. It's really an exchange of knowledge, and the way I practice now compared to where I was 10 years ago is it's different. It's a lot different. But I've just, and it's going to be different 10 years from now, and that's okay. And that's part of what I think what you're saying is you have to be okay with that. And everybody that walks in the door is completely unique, and we really mean it when people ask us, what do you do for this problem? And it sounds like a cop-out when we say, well, everybody's individual, and we really can't say it's the truth. We really, I could see 10 people with the same problem, and they would all get a very different treatment. So I think, like you said, that's probably the biggest growth, is that it's become, we treat everybody as individuals and meet them where they are.
Let's talk about a specific. Can you heal your gut to such an extent that foods you previously were intolerant to can be reintroduced? For instance, dairy, eggs, or potentially even gluten?
Do you want to answer?
No. I know, I said we know the answer about gluten.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. You can heal the gut to a point that you can reintroduce allergens. Again, everybody's different. I have had many people go off of their allergenic foods for 6 months, do the healing things for their adrenals and their lifestyle and taking care of themselves and eating healthier food and not getting antibiotics in their foods and toxins in the foods. And they introduce their allergenic foods and can tolerate it, have no problems. They've now gotten used to the lifestyle of being without it, so they're not as dependent on it. But I then have other patients who reintroduce and can't tolerate it, and go another 6 months and reintroduce and can't tolerate it. So again, I think everybody's different. Gluten, I would say, really shouldn't and can't be well tolerated by anybody, especially the Northern European descendants. They're sort of known as being the gluten people. So that's how I feel.
I totally agree.
Are there any slow food movement groups?
Here in Loudon?
I truly, when I asked the question, I assumed they meant like food groups, like bread and meat. And I was trying to understand what slow food movement groups are. Food that moved through your body slowly.
Clearly, he's never been to our practice. Can you tell he's never met with us? I don't know if it actually the people. I bet Slow Food DC. There you go. I knew there was one in DC, but there's nothing out here in Loudon. Okay,
I think there's one down southern Virginia too,
like Manassas or farther.
like ours.
Oh,
And what are they?
Yeah, what is the slow food movement?
Yeah.
so the slow food movement is. It's a lot like the local organic movement. The whole notion is not only eating locally, eating organically, eating real foods. It's also enjoying the food. Like Dave was saying, rushing out the door, throwing something in, no matter how healthy that thing is that you're putting in your mouth, you're not going to absorb the good stuff from it because you're in sympathetic fight or flight go mode, and that is not digestion mode. Parasympathetic is when we digest, and so you actually have to be sitting, looking at the food, smelling the food, interacting with the food with all your senses, appreciating the food. It's the French. A lot of people talk about how the French eat that way. They take hours to eat a meal, and that may be the French paradox, not the fact that they drink wine with every meal and eat a lot of butter. It may be that they really enjoy the food, and so they're actually digesting it better. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to the slow food?
I think they also try and protect all of these old ways of doing things, cheese making and bread making, those
Yes.
artisans. They try and
Getting back to how we used to prepare.
seeds.
Yes.
There's a university in Italy, a slow food university.
We tried this at church a little bit, on individual things, to slow the kids down, or big people, like dates stuffed with cream cheese, maybe with a the walnut on top, something that can take a little bit longer to
Yeah.
eat,
Yeah.
rather than
donut holes.
Yeah, right.
Standard church fare
Individual things.
donut holes.
It's so true. The worst food.
How, maybe, how to identify GMO labeling?
That's a really good question.
And that's GMO is genetically modified, organic,
Organism.
organism,
Organisms. So
same word.
one way, which I've only heard, I've actually never seen it. You may have seen this in the grocery store, but supposedly labels that start with an 8, labels that start with a 9 number are organic, and I see that in the vegetable produce section. But labels that start with an 8 are supposed to mean genetically modified. But I've never seen a label that starts with 8. I think, honestly, if it doesn't say non-genetically modified or no GMO ingredients, you have to assume that there are genetically modified ingredients in the food. All canola oil is, I don't know if I can say all, this is on tape. I would say the majority of canola oil, the majority of corn, the majority of cotton or cottonseed oil, which is considered vegetable oil, so you may not even know that it's cottonseed oil. A ton of wheat, most soy out there is genetically modified. So, and those foods are in every packaged food out there. So, if you're buying a packaged food, I would look for no GMO ingredients.
And remember that the feed that is fed to livestock
Right.
is often GMO, and if some, there's supposed to be a USDA organic requirement about GMO, but the enforcement of that is very impossible. And there's this whole theory about, well, I'm growing organic wheat, but it's a quarter of a mile downwind from a GMO wheat field, and there's some, the pollen from this wheat field, which is carrying genetic material, pollinates my, organic non-GMO wheat, and suddenly my wheat field is owned by Monsanto. So it's very difficult. There are, through the Environmental Working Group and through is it Green America?
That's a good umbrella to check.
Yeah, that you can sign petitions frequently, and I try to put them on the My Holistic MD's site when they come to me about sign this. This gets sent to our Congress people. To just at least get them to label it. I don't think we're going to stop it from. We're going to see beef that is never been walking around. We're going to see beef that's test tube created within our lifetime being sold in supermarkets. So at least we want them to label it. But you're right, there's no way to tell, really.
It's, it's impossible to avoid it. That's the bottom line. It's impossible to 100% avoid it. But if you're eating a diet that is real food, meaning fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and meats that come from a farmer where they're not using grain that is, they really shouldn't be using grain at all, but if they are feeding other than grass, that it's non-genetically modified, then at least you've covered most of your bases.
Is that changing in Europe?
Yes.
I think if I buy something in Europe or from Europe, it's better than if I buy something.
Yeah. They are much stricter over in Europe about this. And California is really starting to pick up on it,
And usually what starts in California rolls our way.
hopefully.
What are changes that people could make today, or what would be one change if you had to, we're saying just one change that you encourage people to make today to start having an impact in their lives?
Go to bed earlier.
Yeah, I think.
Mom says go to bed.
There's a book about that.
Yeah, I think there are two that we pretty much, more sleep, more quality sleep,
Yeah.
and improve the quality of your food.
Yeah.
Those two things. Those two things would make, our entire culture healthier. If that's all we did, that would be starting with our children in schools, which is starting to take off. And I think there's at least one school in Fairfax County now that does a lot of from scratch cooking. A public school, that is. So so go to bed earlier, get quality sleep, and improve the quality of your food.
Those are two very difficult things to do, and we kind of throw them out there like they're easy. So I think one easy thing to do, I'll actually give two easy things. One easy thing is to include wheatgrass in the diet, which sounds like it would be hard, but it's actually quite easy. You can now buy frozen wheatgrass cubes at the health food store or at Whole Foods, and thaw it out and take it as a shot. You can throw it into smoothies. Wheatgrass is, I think, one of the healthiest foods on the face of the earth.
That's not gluten.
And it's not gluten.
Wheatgrass.
Sounds like gluten, but it's not gluten. So adding wheatgrass, if you really want to get crazy and save a lot of money, you can actually grow it very easily in your windowsill. So that's one change that I think would make a big difference. Another easy change is to add some kind of fermented food into the diet to help digestion. And that can be yogurt, if you can tolerate dairy. It can be raw sauerkraut, which is delicious and addictive. It's not the slimy, cooked, old sauerkraut that we used to be fed when we were kids. It's the crunchy, tangy, delicious sauerkraut that's homemade. And you can get that at the health food store, or you can make it yourself for pennies. Kimchi is another great one. There are a lot of really good fermented foods out there. So I think that's another easy thing to add into your lifestyle to be healthier. I could go on forever. Another one is just to drink more water. Dave actually has an app on his phone that sounds like somebody pouring a glass of water, and it does that throughout the day. And with this app, he has actually completely hydrated himself and feels enormously better. Hydration is way underutilized as a tool for great health.
Using
know
that
the
as
name of the app?
It's called Water Your Body, and it's free. And I think it's just an example. There are many healthy habit apps on the App Store and iTunes, the iStore or whatever, the App Store. But I would say that that app, for example, I've averaged 6 liters of water for the past 10 days, and it's made a huge difference. And I never drank that much water before, But some people don't need that much, so, get your doctor's expert advice before trying this at home.
Another one, should I just keep going?
Keep going, sister.
Another one is just to add more raw food into the diet. Most people eat a lot of cooked food, and we need the enzymes and the antioxidants from raw food, so adding big salads into the diet is a great way to improve health.
How would you rate probiotic pills versus fermented food in terms of probiotic content?
That's a very good question. I am, and I think you are, partial to food. If given the choice between food and a pill, I think food always delivers better. The time when a pill is better is when a person won't eat fermented foods, which is more often than you would think, or when there's a specific problem that a specific probiotic would help with. For example, if somebody's on chronic oral antibiotics they need a very specific type of good bacteria, and that would be when you would want high dose specific probiotics to take.
I think that fermented foods are the best way to maintain gut health and probably overall immune system health. I think that when there's a disease present in the gut or in the body and we're trying to affect change through the gut, then I think you're dealing with a sheer numbers game.
Right.
So you're talking about somewhere around the 10 trillion bugs in the gut, bacteria, funguses, parasites, worms, etc. Fermented food is an excellent way to maintain a certain ecosystem, but to affect a dramatic change in that ecosystem, you just have to flood the gut with probiotics. So I don't think fermented food is enough. The perfect example of that is the now conventionally, it's accepted in conventional medicine to do fecal transplants to cure certain gut infections.
It's true.
It's the back row. There's a maturity problem. Yeah. So,
Sandy, we'll be starting that Monday morning. Okay.
so
Actually looking at the front row face.
I think, So I think that now the other thing about fermented foods is when we say eat fermented food, some people think that that means, oh, I'll have a little bit every once in a while. For fermented food to be effective, and you should try to say that several times fast, it needs to be consistent and of very good quality. So that means multiple times every day for that to be an effective part of a diet. Any amount helps, but if you want to change your health, you need to do it throughout the day.
Right, and not Dannon. I mean, I assume that everybody knows that we're not talking Dannon yogurt. Kombucha is another great
Dannon
one. Thank you.
Yogurt's actually one of the sponsors.
Bubby's
Thanks a lot, Ann.
Yes,
Where-
Bubby's pickles are great.
What else can you buy?
There are chutneys. There are other fermented vegetables, fermented carrots, fermented beets, fermented daikon radish,
Kefir.
kefir.
And then, a lot of people are sort of drawn to the fermented dairy because that does taste the best, and it's kind of the easiest to deliver to our children. Kefir, yogurt, etc. But the fermented vegetables are really, when we talk about traditional diets, it's fermented veggies, and kombucha is really a fermented veggie, so to speak, because of the mushroom. But we encourage people to make their own, and you're basically letting something rot. It's not that hard.
And you don't mind that it is black tea and sugar?
No.
We get that question a lot. Supposedly,
Sugar.
the
Lots of
sugar
sugar in
and the
kombucha.
caffeine gets eaten by the
Yeah.
mushroom. And the longer you let it sit, the more it gets eaten. And so by the time it's gone, you basically have what tastes like vinegar. So most people cut short the fermentation process to make it more palatable. So there is a little bit of sugar and caffeine that remain, depending on how short you cut the process. Now, what's the big one on the market?
Kefir water?
Not GT. Is it GT's? The Synergy. They add fruit juice, so that's even more sugar that's now added in. But in terms of homemade, you can control that by just letting it ferment longer.
Yeah, fermentation by definition is yeast or bacteria eating the sugar and turning it into something else. So by the time a good kombucha is done, there's not really any sugar left, So
I have two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, and this is a very specific question, I hope I'm reading it correctly, what about Lundberg organic rice from Texas versus arsenic.
So that's pretty new. And I'm not really sure what to say because apparently in the samples that the USDA or FDA analyzed, brown rice actually had a higher arsenic content than white rice because most of the arsenic, because it comes from pesticides, was being concentrated in the sheath, the outer coating of the rice. So at this point, I don't really know what to do with that information. As far as I know, they did not include organic rice in the analysis of any of their samples, as far as I know. So I don't know. That for gluten-free people, that's a huge hit. I think that this is all. It's more evidence that we should all just get off grains anyway. But for most people, that's not feasible. So I need to learn more about that before I, come to a big conclusion. However, I will say that leafy green vegetables combined with a toxic food like arsenic-laced rice will help prevent you from absorbing the toxin. The chlorophyll will help bind those up.
So
Fermented foods will do that too.
Yep. Sulfur-containing foods, garlic and onions
Asparagus,
are really good at helping
onions.
detox heavy metals.
Yep.
I was just going to say something else about that. It's gone.
But it's just more evidence that grains should really not be a staple of our diet. It shouldn't be the bottom of the food pyramid for anyone.
That's actually one other really quick and easy thing to do to make yourself healthier is add more parsley and cilantro in the diet. Fresh parsley, fresh cilantro, partly because they are phenomenal heavy metal detoxifiers, so they help prevent the heavy metals in the food from crossing the gut lining, which is why there's a piece of parsley on the plate when you eat out. At least there used to be. I haven't seen that in a long time. But yes, parsley and cilantro are wonderful at offsetting possible arsenic-laced rice.
I would include rosemary as well. An amazing all-purpose antioxidant containing herb.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things we're asking people to do is to identify a success they would like to report next month at our meeting, under the assumption that if you clarify your focus and you decide there's something you want and you have a date to work towards, then that's a good exercise. What would be a success that you would just be so super happy to be able to report 30 days from now in your lives?
In our lives?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a great question. More sleep.
So what would be the success that you would report?
So,
You're gonna have 8 hours of sleep 30 days in a row?
Yeah, you're dreaming. Well, you're not dreaming because you're not sleeping.
I think in bed by 11, I could make that.
Power of the streak? You can put the power of the streak to work?
I could make that
tonight,
promise.
And then every night after that? What
It's
about you,
tough
Dave?
I think it's sitting down with my partner/wife and scheduling for us and our family joyful events that we can look forward to. So I would want to have at least for the next 90 days that there would be at least one event for the family and one event for us that we could look forward to and that we have on the calendar and that we protect.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. Everybody.